Elinor Ostrom's Governing the Commons is a groundbreaking work that fundamentally challenged dominant theories about the management of shared resources. Published in 1990, the book presents a systematic critique of the conventional wisdom that common pool resources, CPRs, such as fisheries, forests, irrigation systems, or grazing lands, are inevitably doomed to overuse and depletion unless managed by either private ownership or centralized state control. Ostrom instead demonstrates through extensive empirical research that communities around the world have developed sophisticated, durable institutions for the collective management of shared resources. This argument not only transformed political economy and environmental policy, but also earned Ostrom the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in 2009, the first ever awarded to a woman in that field. Habja 1. The problem of the commons. The concept of the commons refers to resources that are shared by multiple users and are difficult to exclude others from using, yet are subtractable, meaning one person's use diminishes the availability for others. This includes fisheries, irrigation systems, forests, and groundwater basins. Before Ostrom, two dominant solutions were widely accepted for avoiding the tragedy of the commons, a term popularized by ecologist Garrett Hardin in 1968. Hardin argued that individuals acting in their own self-interest inevitably overuse shared resources, leading to depletion and collapse. His model suggested that only two institutional arrangements could prevent this outcome. 1. Privatization of the resource, giving individuals clear property rights and incentives for sustainable use. Or 2. Government regulation and enforcement by a centralized authority. Ostrom rejected this binary framework. She contended that Hardin's tragedy was not an inevitable consequence of human nature, but a product of flawed assumptions about collective behavior. Her research showed that users of common resources are capable of self-organization and cooperation when the right institutional conditions are present. 2. Beyond the tragedy, the institutional approach. Ostrom's central contribution was to shift the focus from simple models of rational, self-interested individuals to the institutional arrangements that shape their interactions. She emphasized that the way people manage common resources depends on rules, norms, and shared understandings that evolve over time within specific cultural, ecological, and social contexts. Her approach combined political science, economics, sociology, and anthropology, creating what is now known as the Institutional Analysis and Development, IAD, framework. This framework analyzes how rules are formed, enforced, and adapted at multiple levels, individual, community, and governmental, and how these rules affect patterns of cooperation or conflict. Ostrom also distinguished between open access resources, where no rules exist and anyone can use them, and common pool resources, where communities have established rules and boundaries. She showed that many real-world commons are not chaotic free-for-alls, but rather governed by systems of norms, sanctions, and reciprocal obligations that promote sustainability. 3. Case studies of successful common pool resource management. A major strength of Governing the Commons lies in its empirical richness. Ostrom analyzed a wide range of case studies, from Japanese mountain forests to irrigation systems in the Philippines and communal grazing lands in Switzerland. These examples demonstrated that local users can and do create effective self-governing institutions without requiring privatization or government control. The Turble Village, Switzerland. Since the 16th century, the villagers of Turble have managed communal alpine pastures with clear rules about who can graze livestock and how many animals each household may keep. Violations are met with fines and social sanctions, ensuring long-term sustainability. Japanese irrigation associations. In rural Japan, farmers collectively maintain irrigation canals and water distribution schedules. Cooperation is enforced through community meetings, shared labor, and informal reputation systems that discourage free riding. Spanish huerta systems. The irrigation tribunals of Valencia, Spain, are another classic case. These farmer-run institutions have functioned effectively for centuries, allocating scarce water resources fairly and resolving conflicts swiftly through local knowledge and authority. These examples contradict the assumption that users of commons are doomed to conflict and depletion. Instead, they show that self-organization and trust can generate enduring systems of governance. Design Principles for Successful Commons Management. From her extensive fieldwork, Ostrom identified 8 design principles that characterize robust and long-lasting systems of common pool resource governance. These principles have become foundational in environmental policy and institutional design. 1. Clearly defined boundaries. Both the resource and the user group must be clearly delimited to prevent outsiders from free riding. 2. Congruence between rules and local conditions. The rules governing resource use must fit the ecological and social realities of the community. 3. Collective choice arrangements. Most users should be able to participate in modifying and making the rules. 4. Monitoring. Monitors who actively audit resource use must be accountable to the users themselves. 5. Graduated sanctions. Rule violations should be met with penalties that increase gradually, allowing for proportional enforcement. 6. Conflict resolution mechanisms. Accessible, low-cost procedures must exist to resolve disputes among users. 7. Minimal recognition of rights to organize. External authorities should recognize and not undermine the community's right to self-organize. 8. Nested enterprises for larger systems. In complex or large-scale commons, governance activities must be organized in multiple layers of nested enterprises, from local to regional to national. These design principles capture the institutional diversity of successful commons and show that sustainable resource management depends on adaptive, participatory governance rather than rigid top-down control. Critique of conventional economic models. Ostrom's work directly confronted the assumptions of neoclassical economics, especially the notion of homo economicus, the purely self-interested individual who seeks to maximize personal gain. Her empirical findings revealed that real-world actors frequently cooperate, communicate, and develop trust-based norms, even in competitive environments. Through experiments and field studies, Ostrom demonstrated that individuals are not trapped in social dilemmas if they can communicate, build reputations, and craft mutual commitments. This insight aligned her work with emerging fields such as behavioral economics and game theory, which recognize the complexity of human motivation. She also criticized the panacea problem, the tendency of policymakers to apply one-size-fits-all solutions, such as privatization or centralization, to diverse ecological and social systems. For Ostrom, the key to sustainability was polycentric governance, multiple centers of decision-making that interact and learn from one another rather than being dominated by a single authority. 6. Theoretical and practical implications. Governing the commons has far-reaching implications beyond resource management. It challenges fundamental assumptions about collective action, democracy, and institutional design. Ostrom's theory provides a framework for understanding how cooperation can emerge spontaneously from the bottom up, and how communities can create resilience in the face of environmental or economic stress. Her ideas have been applied to a wide range of issues. Climate change governance, encouraging decentralized and community-based responses instead of relying solely on international treaties. Digital commons, the open-source software movement, and Wikipedia reflect Ostromian principles of collective rulemaking and self-monitoring. Urban governance, cities experimenting with participatory budgeting and community-managed public spaces often draw on her theories. Ostrom's insistence on diversity and adaptability makes her framework especially relevant in today's interconnected and complex world, where global problems require cooperation across scales and sectors. 7. Legacy and continuing relevance. Elinor Ostrom's legacy is both intellectual and practical. By restoring trust in human capacity for self-organization, she reshaped how scholars and policymakers think about collective action. Her interdisciplinary approach bridged political science, economics, and ecology, influencing research in environmental governance, sustainability studies, and public policy. In the decades since governing the commons, numerous studies have confirmed and expanded upon her findings. For example, research in Nepal, Kenya, and Mexico has shown that community-managed forests often achieve better conservation outcomes than state-run reserves. Similarly, water users, associations, and fisheries cooperatives worldwide continue to demonstrate the power of locally adapted institutions. Her work also resonates with the growing recognition that top-down governance often fails to address local realities. As climate change intensifies pressures on shared resources, Ostrom's vision of polycentric participatory management offers a promising path towards sustainability. 8. Conclusion. Governing the Commons stands as one of the most influential works in the study of collective action and institutional design. Ostrom's key message is profoundly optimistic. Human beings are not inevitably trapped in the tragedy of the commons. Given the opportunity to communicate, learn, and enforce their own rules, communities can create systems that balance individual incentives with collective well-being. Her 8 design principles continue to guide policymakers and scholars seeking alternatives to privatization and state control. More importantly, her work reminds us that sustainable governance requires not only technical efficiency, but also trust, participation, and respect for local knowledge. In a world increasingly defined by ecological crises and social inequalities, Elinor Ostrom's vision of cooperative self-governance remains both a powerful critique of centralized authority and a hopeful blueprint for the future. Through Governing the Commons, she redefined what it means to manage shared resources, transforming our understanding of human potential, community resilience, and the very idea of the commons itself.